I'm Alice Loxton, and I present documentaries over on History Hit TV. If you're passionate about all things royal history, sign up to History Hit TV. It's like Netflix, but just for history. You've got hours of ad-free documentaries about all aspects of the past. You can get a huge discount for History Hit TV. Make sure you check out the details in the video description and use the code REALROYALTY, all one word, when you sign up. Now, on with the show.
It's 1994, a year of new beginnings around the world. As this historic footage shows, America and Russia sign an agreement which ends the imminent threat of nuclear warfare.
Bill Clinton believes that he and Boris Yeltsin have today made a real contribution to future peace.
South Africa holds its first ever free elections.
27 years in prison, a lifetime of oppression. Today, the vote that makes the sacrifice worthwhile.
And in Britain, the IRA declares a ceasefire after 25 years of bloody conflict. But for the heir to the British throne, 1994 was a year to remember for all the wrong reasons. Prince Charles was shot at in Australia by a man with a starting pistol loaded with blanks. And things went from bad to worse when he became the first British royal to publicly confess to adultery.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife?
Yes, until it became irretrievably broken down.
Charles's royal mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles, became one of the most notorious women in Britain.
Poll ratings were abysmal. She was labelled a marriage breaker, a temptress and worse.
In the spring of 2005, the Prince of Wales finally married the woman he had secretly loved for more than 30 years.
The Prince leading Camilla Parker Bowles out from the shadows on his arm. His former lover and mistress, now his wife, and the new Duchess of Cornwall.
The new Duchess of Cornwall's wedding was no fairy tale. It was a low-key affair, held in a public register office, without her new mother-in-law, the Queen, in attendance. There were no royal fanfares, though monarchists from all over did come to witness it.
We are in Windsor for the wedding and very excited about it.
I think it's been wonderful. I'm so glad so many people have turned up to see them. Camilla looked beautiful.
Public support for Camilla and the marriage had been a long time in the making. It was exactly 19 years to the day since the heir to the throne had sensationally made himself and his mistress front-page news by deciding to give a television interview to publicise a royal biography by journalist Jonathan Dimbleby.
I had freedom to ask the questions I wanted to ask, editorial control over the material. I was doing an interview that anyone would give their eye teeth to ask. I have a life spent doing journalism, and that's what I was doing then.
During the interview, Dimbleby pressed Charles about the true state of the royal marriage and Princess Diana.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down.
The surprising admission, the first time any royal had ever publicly confessed to infidelity, cast the woman he had been adulterous with into a harsh spotlight.
Poll ratings were abysmal. She was labelled a marriage breaker, a temptress and worse.
When the book finally hit the shelves, it contained even more graphic details of the affair. The royal mistress did not respond herself, but friends and family did.
Simon and Carolyn Parker Bowles accuse the Prince of Wales of blaming everyone but himself for his marriage breakdown. They say his revelations in the Jonathan Dimbleby book have dropped Camilla Parker Bowles in a heap. Carolyn is quoted as saying, "It's all right to talk to Camilla, but to tell the world is an entirely different matter." Simon Parker Bowles says, "I'd be more inclined to say poor old Camilla. Prince Charles does not have our sympathy at the moment."
As Charles's popularity declined, a public debate started about his fitness to be king.
If he goes for marriage with Mrs. Parker Bowles, as a potential future Queen consort, he's going to throw the monarchy into very serious doubt.
Not everyone was against him.
There are absolutely no constitutional implications to being an adulterer. After all, we've had kings who were divorced, we've had kings who were separated, we've had kings who had boyfriends and kings who had girlfriends, and kings who simply, didn't divorce their wives but imprisoned them and beheaded them as well, and they've all been king.
These kings have long enjoyed the attention of their mistresses, usually in secret. In 955, the great-grandson of Alfred the Great, Edwig the Fair, came to the throne at the age of just 15. A man who preferred the thrill of the bedroom to the challenges of the throne, he was caught on the day of his coronation with his mistress and her mother by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Future kings followed suit with numerous royal mistresses. Harold II, Henry II, and of course the infamous Henry VIII. Queen Victoria didn't have a mistress, but it was said that she had a long-running affair with one of her servants, John Brown. 150 years later, the allegation was turned into an Oscar-nominated film starring Judi Dench and Billy Connolly, called Her Majesty, Mrs. Brown.
Billy here will tell you that there was a sexual relationship between them, and I will tell you that I don't think there was.
Of course they did. Of course they did. Come on.
Judy says they didn't.
But Judy's English, you know. You see, it isn't so much of a home... See, tantrums, what did I tell you? A nightmare!
A few hours ago, I discharged my last duty as king and emperor.
A royal mistress cost Edward VIII his throne. He abdicated to be with the married woman he loved, the American socialite Wallis Simpson, who would never have been accepted as queen by the British people. The affair had begun 2 years before he became king, while he was Prince of Wales and the nation's most eligible bachelor. When Charles became Prince of Wales, women flocked to him too, hoping they might become Princess of Wales or even his queen. Advice about how to cope with the women who were throwing themselves at him came not from his father, Prince Philip, but from Uncle Dickie, the Earl Mountbatten, the Queen's second cousin and former Viceroy of India. When Charles was 26, Mountbatten wrote to him about sex and life.
I believe in a case like yours that a man should sow his wild oats and have as many affairs as he can before settling down.
Then along came Lady Diana, for whom the Prince of Wales would drop all others, bar one. Prince Charles first met Camilla Parker Bowles at a polo match near Windsor Castle in June 1971. This is probably the first picture of them together. It's certainly one of the earliest, and one of very few. Royal photographers of the time did not think she was anything other than a friend, and certainly not one who would become a lover. When they met again, Camilla apparently captivated Charles by talking about royal mistresses. Her great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, had an affair with Charles's great-great-grandfather, Edward VII, 73 years earlier. Edward was a serial womanizer with 11 mistresses. Alice, his favourite, was described as having the sexual morals of an alley cat. Camilla was born Camilla Shand on the 17th of July, 1947, into an aristocratic family. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, was a successful wine merchant. When she was 16, Camilla was sent to a Swiss finishing school to learn social graces. Today, she's widely filmed and photographed, but back then, Camilla managed to avoid most photographers, so there are hardly any childhood pictures. A trend which continued when she started seeing Prince Charles. They were rarely photographed together. This was taken during a visit to a West End theatre. They also shared a love of horse riding, Charles as a polo player and Camilla as a fox hunter. They coined nicknames for each other. Camilla became Gladys and Charles Fred. The names came from a legendary radio comedy show, The Goons. Charles had long been an admirer of Spike Milligan, Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe and Michael Benteen.
Benteen was perhaps best known for his role in The Goons. The show changed the face of British comedy and won the Prince of Wales as both a fan and friend for Benteen. The Prince was at the comic's bedside the day before he died.
Fred and Gladys captured the spirit of the royal affair. But Charles's relationship with his heroes was not always reciprocated.
Here we go. I have a letter to read out here from His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
Do I kneel down for this?
I must confess that I've been a lifelong fan of the participants in the show, and particularly of Spike Milligan.
Oh, the little grovelling bastard.
After the show, Spike Milligan sent a fax to the Prince saying, "Suppose a knighthood is now out of the question."
For the man famous for his anarchic sense of humour, an appointment at the palace today to meet his biggest fan and receive his knighthood.
I said, hello, Prince Charles, and that was it.
Camilla and Charles's affair came to a halt when duty called. As future head of the family firm, Charles was expected to forge a career in the armed forces. He enrolled in the Navy and sailed off into the sunset to spend 6 months in the Caribbean. Camilla found herself a new lover, a close friend of the royal family, Major Andrew Parker Bowles. They married in 1973. Andrew was the son of a minor royal, Derek Parker Bowles, and Anna Trafford, the daughter of a millionaire racehorse owner. His father was close to the Queen Mother, and she became his godmother. When Charles dated Diana, the Parker Bowles were never far away. Andrew was promoted and got one of the best jobs in the army.
Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Parker Bowles commands the mounted regiment of the Household Cavalry. He and his wife are close friends of Prince Charles and Lady Diana, and they both spent the weekend with the Parker Bowleses just before Prince Charles proposed.
Well, you know as well as I do, everyone knows he's a marvellous leader and a marvellous man.
The marvellous man chose Parker Bowles to be his head of security when he finally married Diana. His personal bodyguard, riding beside the royal carriage after the ceremony.
Historically, it's been obviously the ceremonial side is the most important side. At the same time, there is the protection side and the security side.
Although at first the royal marriage seemed idyllic, cracks soon began to show, as Charles began a second affair with Camilla.
She was seething and dying inside because she was jealous and angry at his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles.
Charles made matters worse when he tried to make a joke about needing 2 women in his life at a state dinner in New Zealand.
I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had 2 wives. And I could have walked down the middle, directing the operation.
Diana was not amused. Matters finally came to a head in 1980, when the foursome attended a small race meeting in northwest England. The photographers had a field day, as Charles spent most of his time with Camilla, while his wife was escorted by a bemused Parker Bowles. Even though they were often pictured together, behind the scenes, they were deadly enemies. Diana nicknamed Camilla the Rottweiler. Camilla dubbed Diana that ridiculous creature. The true extent of Charles's feelings towards the Rottweiler had not been made clear in the biography that outed Camilla as his royal mistress. Britain had no idea how he really felt. But in 1993, the people of Australia got to know firsthand when they read about it all in New Idea magazine.
According to New Idea, it's the full, unedited text of a telephone conversation that's both intimate and explicit. The magazine devotes 3 of its pages to the conversation, which it says was recorded by a radio enthusiast 4 years ago.
In the UK, the press, afraid of incurring the wrath of the royal family, held back. Many, including the then editor of the Sunday Times, were appalled.
Those in the know in London and the chattering classes and those with fax machines to Australia can know what's in it, but the rest of the country doesn't.
Buckingham Palace tonight declined to comment on the contents of the magazine. There's been no comment from Mrs. Parker Bowles. In the past, her husband has dismissed such allegations as rubbish.
The tapes became known as Camillagate, and they revealed a level of intimacy nobody had anticipated.
It was only a matter of time before the tabloids printed what's been circulating in private for days, the full transcript of an alleged conversation between the Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles.
it was right that the 9 million readers of the Sunday Mirror should no longer be denied the right to make their own mind up about what was involved in the tapes.
The recordings and their publication was condemned by the UK press watchdog.
Is an odious exhibition of journalists dabbling their fingers in the stuff of other people's souls in a manner which adds nothing to the legitimate public interest in the situation of the heir to the throne.
Editors from the tabloid newspapers were hauled before Parliament and given a hard time.
I'm explaining.
Yes,
let me just carry on. Let me carry on for a second. Let me carry on. You ask the question. You ask the question. I'll give the answer.
The journalists were unrepentant, saying Camilla had brought it all upon herself.
You know, having an affair with Prince Charles behind the husband's back is not necessarily the best way of leading a low-profile life.
A year later, Andrew Parker Bowles announced he was divorcing Camilla.
The crunch came last summer when Andrew Parker Bowles, we believe, felt publicly humiliated by the TV confession of Prince Charles that he had had 3 affairs with Camilla Parker Bowles spanning 21 years.
Charles and Camilla were at last free to openly pursue their relationship.
The Prince now faces some difficult choices. Should he seek a divorce? Should he marry Mrs. Parker Bowles?
The marriage seems to be totally over, and I think in circumstances like that, it's better that a line is drawn under it.
The line was only finally drawn when the unimaginable happened.
This morning, shocking news that Diana, the Princess of Wales, has died.
Diana's death cemented her legend as the people's princess. It also made the public even more determined that Camilla would not be their queen.
I don't think she should be there, not yet. It's a bit too early.
When it became clear that Charles was not going to be able to force Camilla on his future subjects or his family, he began a press campaign like no other. He hired a top PR man to work on public opinion. Even though Charles and Camilla did not appear formally in public together, photographers got tipped off when Camilla was undertaking what became known as unofficial royal duties. And it was a carefully orchestrated royal exclusive in the Daily Mirror that signalled Princes William and Harry had at last accepted their late mother's great rival.
The details are only just emerging of the meeting here at St James's Palace between William and his father's longtime friend, Camilla Parker Bowles. He's never insisted his sons meet Camilla, but he did tell the Queen, today attending a service at Westminster Abbey, that his friendship with her was non-negotiable.
Charles and Camilla also played a guessing game with the media. When would they be officially seen together for the first time?
Prince Charles is due to arrive any time now to attend a 50th birthday party being given for the sister of his longtime love, Camilla Parker Bowles.
It was a game the press loved.
The media pack, shoulder to shoulder this evening, had started arriving outside the Ritz yesterday morning. Everyone determined to get the shot of Charles and Camilla happily side by side.
He desperately wants this picture to happen. There were several times last year when they contemplated doing it, but they've finally decided tonight's the night, and good luck to him. And good luck to her too, because she's very nervous too, I imagine.
The picture Charles wanted only happened when the party was over.
The Prince of Wales and Camilla Parker Bowles seen together in public quite clearly, coming down the steps of the Ritz. No secret about their relationship now, none possible at all. The picture that people have waited so long to see. The scene that says so much about the Prince of Wales, the love of his life, and of course his possible future.
I think we've been watching a very, very skillful public relations campaign. They've worked it out. Last year it was a private function, a family function. This year it's an official function, something of the Prince's. We're going to see a year or so of this, and then it's going to move on a stage. And the question, of course, is that going to be a marriage?
Next came the public kiss.
It was the first time the couple had shown such affection in public.
Camilla is, of course, a fixture in Charles's private life, and we've got used to seeing them together at events like these. But the truth is that her position in his public life is still fraught with difficulties. The big question remains whether Charles himself wants to take it to the next stage.
British public is a very forgiving public, and I think they're ready to see some new dramatic turn in the Prince of Wales's fortunes. I think they would be behind him, and I think that the sooner they address the marriage issue, the better.
Operation Charles and Camilla was almost done.
The Prince of Wales has been making great efforts recently to encourage public acceptance of his relationship with Mrs. Parker Bowles.
But there was one final hurdle to cross.
A poll today suggests 2/3 of people now support remarriage.
This poll has it at a higher level, which may be a measure of the effect of the Queen's perhaps grudging acceptance of Camilla as Prince Charles' consort.
When it was leaked that Camilla had been secretly meeting the head of the Church of England, the rumour mill went into overdrive.
Revelations that she has had at least 6 meetings with Dr. George Carey, the Archbishop of Canterbury, suggest that the question of marriage is now on the agenda.
Hi there. So the long-running question, will they or won't they, has now finally been answered with the announcement from Clarence House here today. The decision has been taken that the timing is now right for the marriage to take place, whatever the constitutional implications or controversies. Princes William and Harry also said today in a statement that they were both very happy for their father and Camilla and wished them all the luck in the future.
So what was once unthinkable became a reality at a humble register office near Windsor Castle.
This, a royal love affair, finally without hindrance. Their long and difficult journey to the altar was about to end. Prince William, a witness, and his brother Harry led the close family members into Windsor's Guildhall for the short, private, civil ceremony.
Camilla was now part of the royal family, with the title, the Duchess of Cornwall. Now only one question remains. When Prince Charles eventually becomes king, what title will his wife have? Some constitutional experts believe he should follow Queen Victoria's example. She made her husband Albert the Prince Consort. Camilla could therefore become the Princess Consort.
It's a very modern solution. If the husband of the Queen is not automatically king, which he isn't, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, then in the modern world, why should the wife of the king automatically become queen?
But Prince Charles has not yet given up on the idea that one day his former royal mistress might be queen.
That could be, said the prince, a departure from the assumption that Camilla will be princess consort, not queen. Controversial, given the widespread public unease about a Queen Camilla.
Whatever the unease, one thing is certain. When the time comes, Camilla will be closest to the new king. And with that comes influence. It's 1936, and Europe is in the grip of Adolf Hitler, an emerging dictator who will soon have the world at war. In the UK, the royal family is also in turmoil. The king, Edward VIII, is in love with a married woman. And it's said he's sympathetic to the Nazi cause. His brother, the Duke of York, will soon inherit the throne and a nation in crisis. But he has little ambition and a stutter which made speaking in public terrifying.
I have the greatest pleasure in declaring it open.
Can the Duke conquer his demons and overcome his timidity to take on the Third Reich as Britain's wartime king?
For the second time in the lives of most of us, we are at war. The exhibition is an empire undertaking.
The man who was soon to become King George VI had a problem which was worrying his advisors.
The hallmark of the Commonwealth of Nations.
They called it the King's Speech.
I have the greatest pleasure
because he stuttered badly.
in declaring it open.
A result of a hidden childhood trauma, which meant the pre-war battle of rhetoric was being won by Hitler. Millions flocked to see him, and radio and newsreel footage carried his messages of hate around the world. The power of speech had become a vital part of the propaganda war. George could not compete, but his stammer could be tamed by this man, Lionel Logue, an unorthodox Australian speech therapist. Logue took George under his wing and subjected him to a tough regime of intensive vocal therapy.
We've had a very good show here tonight. And I thank you all very much. And I wish you good night.
Few knew about it at the time. It was a well-kept secret. But 90 years later, Logue's efforts were revealed in the hit movie The King's Speech, which won 4 Oscars and many other awards.
The fundamentals of Lionel's technique was no matter who you are, from what station of life, because he was also working with World War I returned soldiers with what we would now call post-traumatic distress syndrome.
Particularly for that generation of men in 1937 and the obstacles and their suspicion of therapy, and they were suspicious of all psychology, really.
Lionel Logue died in 1952, but left behind a legacy. His transformation of a stuttering George into a regal king.
Possibly the most startling piece of evidence which is...
Logue died a year after the king, but his diaries helped his grandson write a book about the relationship. It was his grandfather's own words that helped Colin Firth learn about the nature of the king's stammer.
He says, contracts teeth and mouth and mechanically closes throat, gets chin down and closes throat at times. And so, you know, an extraordinary habit of clipping small words and in, on, and of saying the first syllable of one word and the last of another. So this all helped inform...
Would have been very useful for Colin Firth.
Yeah.
The real George VI never expected to be giving speeches as king. That was his elder brother's job.
I have determined to renounce the throne, to which I succeeded on the death of my father. And I am now communicating this, my final and irrevocable decision.
When Edward quit his throne to be with the woman he loved, America's Wallis Simpson, George was suddenly thrust into the harsh glare of the royal limelight. No one was less suited to be a monarch than the then Duke of York. His brother had previously captured the headlines. A dashing figure, while George led a relatively quiet life, preferring to spend his time at a modest London home with his young daughters. When he did have to appear in public, he relied heavily on his wife Elizabeth. No way was he classic king material. He was born Albert Frederick Arthur George on the 14th of December, 1895, at Sandringham in Norfolk. A huge estate that had been a royal retreat since 1862. It was the age of the Victorians. His great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, would reign for another 5 years. He was christened Albert, but the family shortened this to Bertie, a nickname that stuck with him for life. Bertie had 4 brothers and a sister, the eldest, Edward, being third in line to the throne. They all lived in a mansion called York Cottage, where Bertie was born. It became their prison, controlled by their father, who would become King George V, on the death of his father, Edward VII. He treated his 5 sons like lower-ranking naval officers and was obsessed with discipline, punctuality, and obedience. At the age of 13, Bertie, who had developed a stutter because of his father's abuse, was sent to Naval College. It turned out to be the making of him. He was put under the care of the school doctor, Louis Gregg, a former captain of the Scottish rugby team. Gregg was physically imposing and tough, but unlike the king, he did not bully Bertie. For 20 years, Gregg guided Bertie through life. After college, they both joined the Navy and fought alongside each other in the Great War. This is rare footage of the Battle of Jutland, the only significant naval battle of the war between Britain and Germany. The result was inconclusive. Bertie was in the thick of the action, manning a gun turret. After the war, Bertie turned to the Air Force and quickly qualified as a pilot. But the risks associated with flying were too much for the royal family, and he was persuaded to pursue a less dangerous life. Cambridge University, where Louis Gregg continued to keep an eye on him. marriage provided Bertie with a golden opportunity to indulge his passion for sport, mostly as a spectator. But he did become a fine golfer. He also played tennis at the highest level. In 1926, at the age of 30, Bertie became the first member of Britain's royal family to take part at Wimbledon. Partnered by Greg, he played in the first round of the doubles. It didn't go well. He and Louis were trounced in straight sets by British opponents who had previously won the championships. Greg's influence on Bertie extended beyond the military and sport. He helped turn the Duke into one of the world's most eligible bachelors. The Roaring Twenties brought a huge sexual revolution. Women got the vote on both sides of the Atlantic, becoming mistresses of their own destiny. And that included overturning the traditional battle of the sexes.
Once a year, the bathing bells take a sweet revenge. All the other 364 days, they spend their time parading in front of a lot of men to be judged for beauty or something. Now they're in the judge's place and the beach lifeguards are being judged. Aren't they cute? Baby, take a bow. They like that one. The winner is a man named Ken Griffith. They cool him up and then hot him up.
Music heated things up too. Jazz crossed the pond to London, and fun-loving women became flapper girls as they did the Charleston. In the middle of it all was Bertie, single and fancy-free. As was his brother, the Prince of Wales. The pair had become inseparable and equally outrageous. They took up with a pair of married women and called themselves the Four Do's because they could do whatever they wanted. This photograph shows the carefree, casual side of the gang. It was how they really saw themselves. Bertie was smitten by his do, an Australian socialite, Sheila Chisholm, but the affair was doomed. His father, the king, demanded an end to it, offering Bertie the title, the Duke of York, provided he gave up Sheila. He chose royal duty over love, but admitted to being heartbroken, but not for long. Within weeks, another young woman had come into his life, a member of the British aristocracy who would turn his world upside down. Bertie's new girlfriend was 19-year-old Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the 9th child of the Earl of Strathmore, a noble line that stretched back to the 14th century. Elizabeth had been raised in Glamis Castle, an ancient pile in the Scottish lowlands. In 1920, she moved to London to become part of the Royal Society scene. She became a debutante and caught Bertie's eye. It wasn't love at first sight as far as Elizabeth was concerned, but she did become his tennis partner. They became a regular fixture on the double circuit. It took Bertie 2 years and 2 goes at proposing to her before she finally agreed to marry him. She later told a friend that she married Bertie out of duty. Only later did she fall in love. At their wedding in Westminster Abbey, huge crowds gathered. It was the first royal wedding to be turned into a spectacle and to be substantially filmed. Previously, the royals had been married quietly in private chapels. But the ravages of the Great War had left Britain battered and depressed. It was thought a bit of pomp would cheer things up. The black and white newsreel doesn't do justice to the colourful turnout. Bertie cut a dashing figure in his Air Force blue dress uniform. His new wife wore a medieval-style lace dress. In 1923, radio was king in Britain, but the BBC was prevented from relaying the ceremony because the then Archbishop of Canterbury feared it might be listened to in disreputable pubs and bars. It was to be 3 years before the royal couple had their first child. During that time, Bertie's wife became hugely popular and earned herself a nickname, the Smiling Duchess. The Yorks were a happy family. Their daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, grew up with only minimal press intrusion. Movie newsreels were few and far between. But all that was about to change.
The king's life was moving peacefully towards its close.
The reign of George V had come to an end.
Death has come peacefully to the king at 11:55.
Edward, Prince of Wales, was now king, and his younger brother next in line. 326 days later, unexpectedly, Bertie became king. He chose the name George rather than Albert. By his side sat his faithful wife, now Queen Elizabeth. Their daughters were now heirs to the throne. In Europe, war was on the cards. The Hitler Youth were holding training and recruiting camps in Germany, preaching intolerance and Aryan values. Britain's king, meanwhile, was organising a very different rallying call. To galvanise the nation's workers, Bertie had set up summer camps to help boost morale and the virtues of equality. Alongside him, in this newsreel footage, are his wife and daughters Princess Margaret and the future Queen of England, Princess Elizabeth. In Germany, Hitler's words were also seducing members of George's family, in particular his brother Edward, now known as the Duke of Windsor. Much to the annoyance of the British government, he and Wallis Simpson visited Hitler, and the Führer vowed to return him to his throne if Germany succeeded in conquering Britain. Edward wasn't the only one who thought Hitler could be a friend.
Here in Bavaria, Mr. Chamberlain was accorded a roar of howls from the crowd. His mission of peace was greeted with enthusiasm by the people of Germany.
When I come back, I hope I may be able to say, as Hotspur says in Henry IV, out of this mental danger, we pluck this flower safely.
Appeasement, of course, didn't work, and Britain needed an ally, one with power and influence. The new king found himself in America, at the White House, charming President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Recently, our nation has had the pleasure of a visit from King George VI as a courteous recognition of the cordiality and the goodwill that prevails between two great nations. Its significance lay in the fact that friendship could exist between the two countries without fear of any act of aggression by the one against the other.
Hitler was now the aggressor, and the king and the president formed a lasting friendship. But their joy was short-lived.
First the French Premier, then Mr. Chamberlain for Britain, rejected Hitler's so-called peace offer because it was based on the old recipe of the burglar making friends with the police after he'd got what he wanted. We know now what Nazi promises are worth.
War brought a new friendship for the king. Winston Churchill had replaced Neville Chamberlain as Prime Minister.
The fate of Holland and Belgium, like that of Poland, Czechoslovakia and Austria, will be decided by the victory of the British Empire and the French Republic. The whole world is against Hitler and Hitlerism.
Churchill became the voice of Britain.
But if anybody likes to play rough, we can play rough too.
Taking the war of words to the heart of the Nazi hierarchy.
When I warned them that Britain would fight on alone, whatever they did, their generals told their Prime Minister and his divided cabinet, in 3 weeks, England will have her neck wrung like a chicken. Some chicken. Some neck.
While Churchill led from the front, the king led by example, by subjecting his family and the staff in Buckingham Palace to food rationing, turning off the central heating. Royal parks were dug up and planted with much-needed crops. And the king saved water too. No bath in the palace could have more than 5 inches of hot water. Bertie moved his daughters to the relative safety of Windsor Castle. But he and his queen remained in Buckingham Palace to face the German Blitz with the rest of London. It wasn't long before it became a target, and they had a close call.
This was the effect of a time bomb that exploded in the grounds of the King's London home. It fell only a few feet from the palace building, close to the King's sitting room.
The King and Queen were in the sitting room with the windows open when the bomb went off. Had they been closed, the royal couple would have been shredded by flying glass.
Truly, this is a war of all the people. We're all in it.
The attack, while shaking the royals, proved a massive propaganda boost. Not even a direct hit on the palace could bring down the monarchy, and in the Queen's words, they could now look the East End in the eye. Which is exactly what they did. The morning after the night before often saw the King and Queen in East London, amongst the devastation. Bertie's wife became more than just a symbol of the bravery of the people in the face of Hitler's onslaught. She became a champion for the women of Britain, who she felt were often underrated by the war effort.
Many of you have had to see your family life broken up. Your husband going off to his allotted task. Your children evacuated to places of greater safety. We, no less than men, have real and vital work to do. To us also is given the proud privilege of serving our country in her hour of need.
The hour of need also meant her husband wearing military uniform for almost 6 years. When war broke out, he vowed not to wear civilian clothes in public again until the fight was over. Bertie relentlessly toured the battle lines and garrisons to personally thank his men, to show he was right behind them. The mood of the country about its king was captured by the singer Vera Lynn, who had become the force's sweetheart. She sang about the day she met the king.
He talked and we spoke just like two ordinary folk. The day I met His Majesty the King.
When Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker on April the 30th, 1945, the war was all but over. A week later, Bertie and his family were able to take to the balcony of Buckingham Palace to lead a nation's rejoicing.
5 years ago, I promised you blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And your untiring response brought us, in the end, victory over Germany.
Even though it was very much Churchill's hour, the crowds who flocked to Buckingham Palace made it clear who they wanted. The people of Britain had spent a long time fighting for their king and country. 7 years later, Bertie was dead, at the age of 56. A 40-year smoking habit had helped kill him. But it was the long years of war that were most to blame. His devotion to duty almost certainly cost him his life. His 14 years on the throne coincided with the most destructive war in history. The end of an empire, which once covered a quarter of the Earth's surface and a third of its population. When he was born, there were few cars on the road. Man had yet to fly. Homes were lit by candles or gas. At his death, there were more than 4 million cars in Britain. The world's first commercial jet airliner, the Comet, was in service. And over 20 million people would tune in to watch his personal legacy on television. The coronation of his daughter, Queen Elizabeth II.